I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet on the lands of the Kaurna people, and I pay my respects to Kaurna people's elders, both past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that these lands were never ceded. I'd like to welcome all of our guests tonight, and I'd really like to acknowledge our incredible lineup of speakers. We're going to dive into some great conversations about artistic practice and the role of mentorships in shaping artistic practice. And we've got some wonderful people to introduce you to in just a short minute. But first of all, I should introduce myself. I'm Emma Fay, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Guildhouse. And for some of you who may not know all that much about what Guildhouse does or our history, I thought I would just quickly introduce us and tell you a little bit about how we started and what we do. Guildhouse was an organisation founded in the 1960s by a group of practitioners who were really passionate about ensuring that professional craftspeople and artists could be seen and valued by their community, and that it would be possible to have sustainable careers. And that is absolutely at the heart of what we do at Guildhouse now, 54 years on. We have over 1,000 members spanning all forms of arts practice, visual arts practice, from visual art, craft and design at all stages of practice. So from tertiary students all the way through to established practitioners. And so mentorships have always played a really significant role in our organisation and what we do to support the sector to thrive. And this particular research project has really stemmed from decades of delivering mentorships at Guildhouse. In the last few years, we have pondered over what has worked and what hasn't worked so well, and what we've heard from artists about what the emergent needs are. And that led us to developing the Catapult Mentorship program, which we were able to secure the support of the visionary Ian Potter Foundation in this particular project. And that allowed us to make a significant investment and a sustained commitment to offering mentorships to artists, particularly early career and mid-career artists in South Australia over the course of 3 years. And what was really important to us when we proposed this project to the Ian Potter Foundation was that we would not only deliver mentorships to artists, but it was this longitudinal research study, which was to allow us to investigate, move beyond the anecdotal research and understand what it is about mentorships that are so intrinsic to long-term career development for artists, and produce some actually substantial data as well as some wonderful storytelling around this importance, so that we could take it beyond Guildhouse, actually, share it with fellow arts organisations, funding bodies, governments, etc. And we can talk more nationally or internationally even about the importance and ensuring that this is a valued and sustained contribution to artistic career development. And over the course of the 3 years that we've had the support of the Ian Potter Foundation, we've been able to attract and engage with other supporters and partners to grow the program. This has included individual donors. It's included clearly the University of South Australia with this research study, Country Arts SA, the Art Gallery of South Australia and the Tarnanthi Festival, and the City of Adelaide. And all of these partners have recognised the value of mentorships and have made a pointed contribution in one way or another. So as I've sort of highlighted, I guess, the mentorships program, Catapult, the goal of this initiative was really to better understand and showcase the value of mentorships in long-term artistic career development. And I do want to acknowledge that there are lots of forms of mentorships, and what we're talking about, I guess, or what we're documenting is what Guildhouse has done, particularly in the last few years. And the Catapult mentorship model is very much artist-led. Artists define what goals they have for their own practice, whether that is a creative goal or a professional practice goal. And they identify a mentor, a challenging, ambitious mentor that will stretch them and help them achieve that goal. Now, sometimes Guildhouse plays quite an active role in that matching process, but we really support the individual artist, the mentee, as we call them, to undertake that process themselves, because that conversation, those early conversations, really set the foundations for what is to follow. And most artists will work with their mentor for a period of up to 12 months, depending on the nature of their project and how they might engage with each other. So this research study has really looked back at up to 2 decades worth of data as it invited artists from programs in that Guildhouse have offered since the early 2000s up until the recent first tranche of Catapult recipients. And the research has been led by Professor Susan Luckman from the University of South Australia. It is an important juncture. This is just the interim report of a 3-year study. But it's really exciting that we are able to present these findings because it does give us this incredible comparison between artists who have undertaken mentorships up to a decade ago versus, or up to 2 decades ago, sorry, as opposed to those who've really just recently completed one. I won't say much more about the actual research study itself. I'll leave Susan to do that. I would like to take a little moment at this point in time to express a special thank you to the University of South Australia's Research Communication Fund and the Pro Vice Chancellor Research, Marnie Hughes-Warrington's support, which has enabled us to produce this incredibly elegant interim report, which was expertly designed by a South Australian designer, Amy Milhinch. So I'm just going to give a little brief overview of this evening and then pass over to Susan because we really want to hear from everyone else. Susan is going to share some of the highlights of the research, some of the key findings with a brief overview for about 10 minutes or so. And then I'll lead a conversation with Lauren Simeone and Simone Tippett, who were participants in the research, in a mentorship program in 2016. So I've had the benefit of working together for some time in the considered mentorship and then have some time for reflection. Following that, the Lord Mayor Sandy Verschoor, City of Adelaide, will be convening a Q&A between our participants, both Susan Luckman as the researcher and our 2 artists as mentor and mentee. So that's just a little bit of an oversight of the whole event, and we're going to do it in an hour, which is pretty remarkable. So to introduce Susan. Susan is the Dean of Research at UniSA Creative, the University of South Australia. She's an interdisciplinary cultural studies scholar whose work is concerned with the intersections of creativity, place and technology. Her research explores these relationships in relation to work in the cultural and creative industries, digital media and grassroots innovation. She is currently Chief Investigator on a 4-year Australian Research Council Discovery Project, promoting the making self in the microeconomy, which explores how online distribution is changing the environment for operating a creative micro-enterprise, and with it, the opportunities for mobile working lives and the impacts upon larger relationships between public and private spheres this entails. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Professor Susan Luckman to share her insights from the research study. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Emma, and please bear with me while I just do the share screen thing. And apologies for ducking out just then. I realised I was disconnected and down to 30% power. I probably gave Emma a heart attack when I suddenly disappeared from the screen. Thank you, Emma, for that wonderful introduction. And having spent some time at the museum this afternoon talking about the rich material culture of the Kaurna people, I too would like to acknowledge that I speak from and stand here today on unceded Kaurna land. Thank you for the opportunity to both undertake this report and to talk today to people about it. It's, as you said, an interim report. This report was funded by the university to replace a session we wanted to have with Guildhouse about 6 months ago, just as COVID hit. So we see this as very much at the beginning of an ongoing dialogue with all of you around the findings and around the ongoing project. We have another 1.5 years of this to go. I'm just going to begin with this quote because it sets a bit of a scene for the rest of what I want to say about the report. And I'm going to go into or show you quite a few rather dense slides, and I just want to apologise in advance for that, but also reiterate that this report is now downloadable from the UniSA website, and Guildhouse will be sending out an email to people tomorrow advising of where you can find it on the Guildhouse website. So it's going to be absolutely available for people to look at and pour through a bit more and consider. The report, its richness comes from the quotes that people gave us in the interviews. And I'm very conscious of the fact that many of you who gave up your time to talk to us are in the room today. So thank you so much. This wouldn't be possible without you and your generosity to feed back into the community about your experience of mentorship. And this particular quote also flags one of the key themes that will keep emerging across the report and my presentation here tonight. And it's that sense of the importance of mentorship and the ongoing value of mentorship for validation, acknowledgement, acceptance, and in many ways permission to take yourself seriously as a creative practitioner, and how incredibly strong this still remains today. So just some details on the actual research program itself. The key research questions guiding the study, as Emma's already given an introduction to, were what were the outcomes of previous Guildhouse and before that Craft Self mentorship programs, and how can the learnings from these be incorporated into future Catapult programs? The research also fills an important gap in academic research into mentorships. One of the most incredible things we found when we first started this project almost 2 years ago, and we did a bit of a classic background literature review, was there's very little that's been ever done in the research space on mentorships. They're kind of this thing that's taken for granted that everybody does. But especially in the creative and arts practice space, there's very little research. There's one particular study we referred to somebody's PhD thesis that's really valuable. Arts Australia have done 1 or 2 substantial studies, not necessarily a university kind of research study, but really important things too. But there's not much that's actually been done drilling down into the detail. So far we have interviewed 37 people. Many of them have been from the pre-2018 Catapult cohort, and we've now interviewed, or did interview, just as COVID was starting to hit, 17 people from the current Catapult, or first iteration of the Catapult program. Here's a whole wodge of demographics. And you can just get a sense of a number of the key things that, of the general sort of demographics of the Guildhouse programs generally. I know you might note the ATSI involvement. I know this is something Guildhouse are looking to increase and build upon. But one of the key things I do want you to just note from this is the age of mentees. I don't know, given I'm talking to a room full of people, or many of whom have been involved, you may be aware of this, but I think a lot of people tend to assume that mentors and mentees are going to have an age difference in the relationship, that a mentor is presumed to be someone more senior, perhaps been in the career for longer, and that presumes some sort of understanding of, or presumption of, age difference. And I really want to make note of the fact that one of the key findings here is that mentors and mentees were very often of a similar age. And it was just about what particular skills the mentor had that the mentee wanted that people were matched upon the basis of. This isn't necessarily senior people in the sense of older people in the community always offering mentor support to more junior people. And I think that's an important thing. Mentorship is important across a career. It's not something that just happens at the beginning of a career. So as I said, a lot of complex data here. This is the responses to the question, what do you perceive as barriers, if any, to the continuing development of your creative career? And knowing, once again, the people in the room, probably no surprises here. The key thing people were trying to often find out, in addition to ramping up their creative practice, learning a new skill in their creative practice, was to get advice on how to make money from their creative practice. How do you operate as a professional, preferably making the majority of your income, if not a full-time income, from your creative practice. And this has remained, as you can see with the reference to cash flow there, quite stable. But one of the things I will just once again draw your attention to was when it comes to the more recent Catapult program, we can see a shift here, I think, in what we expect from government funding versus other approaches to being a creative practitioner. And by that I mean people in the most recent Catapult program were less likely to look at the absence of government funding as a barrier, not because it's not seen as such, but probably because its presence is not taken as something that's readily available like previous generations may have experienced. And instead, there's a greater emphasis on some of the more entrepreneurial kind of skills. How do I market myself? How do I get business acumen, as you can see here? Avenues to sell work. How do you actually get into galleries these days when the gatekeeping processes perhaps aren't as clear as they used to be? So there's a shift there towards an understanding of, or a resignation to, a more entrepreneurial mindset when it comes to setting oneself up in creative business, rather than necessarily hoping to get some kind of government support or funding. But regardless of all these barriers, mostly this was, I have to say, a good news story. Most people, not everyone's mentorship was perfect, but for one reason or another, most people that we spoke to did find the whole experience incredibly valuable. Most mentees responded that the mentorship would have career-long value and impacts, and would often worked as a key moment in their career. Like many other learning and planning-based experiences, the actual benefits can take a while to realise and often have a long lead time, and are often best understood in retrospect. But what we heard from many of these mentees was the mentorship had played a lifelong and or pivotal role in their personal as well as professional development. And this includes the ongoing willingness of many mentors to assist former mentees by opening doors through opening gallery exhibitions, writing endorsements for grant or gallery exhibition applications, and that ongoing commitment and that ongoing relationship. And is one of the key findings from the report and the important things that emerges for people from this. Having a go-to name in the industry that they can ask for support on these kind of key moments. I also want to emphasise the mutuality. It wasn't just the mentees that spoke really highly of the experience. Mentors on the whole found an incredibly valuable experience too. In particular, mentors spoke of valuing the strong sense of reciprocity underpinning the relationship. Most saw it as a collaboration among peers. As I said, most people were often of a similar age group rather than necessarily having a large age gap. And even where there was perhaps a larger age gap, there was a sense of having access to someone to renew your own creative practice, to advise you on things that they maybe knew, took for granted that you weren't so au fait with. So it was an opportunity and space for mutual learning and creative renewal. So almost all mentors spoke also, and this just speaks to the generosity of the community, of the strong sense of obligation they felt to give back to the creative community, with mentoring seen as an essential part of giving back thanks to all the support and advice that they'd received across their own careers. For those mentors who maybe were thinking that they were moving more towards the end of their career, this is also seen as a form of succession planning, of handing on invaluable knowledge that had been gained through hard yakka and experience to people coming forth after them. But I do also want to reinforce here the importance of doing this within a scaffolded program. There's a beautiful lot of goodwill out there, but bills still need to be paid. And as we know, in terms of a lot of apprenticeship opportunities that go begging, mentorship, apprenticeships, all these things take time on behalf of the people sharing their knowledge, and it takes them away from making their own living. So the importance of being paid for their time was something that was reinforced in this study, and just the importance of recognising and providing that space to give back was something that really emerged quite strongly, and I think speaks to the importance of programs like Guildhouses. So just returning to some of those key findings, as I said, what was really the strongest takeout still in terms of why people valued this was the sense of confidence being accepted into a program and having a senior person, a named person, a person they looked up to in the field, take them under their wing, take them seriously as a professional, creative practitioner or artist. And the value of that to how people perceive themselves and the confidence they took forward is just incredible. It was about the relationships that worked in particular were able to establish a trusting relationship, and people did speak to the importance once again of that scaffolded program, of having a few guides and being led through the need to set some parameters early so that you could avoid potentially some hiccups down the track. Some group people were more informal than others, but most valued the opportunity, or at least the prompt, to think through how will we go about this, and having a little bit of a more formality to the relationship and setting up expectations that came from being in a scaffolded program. What also worked in building trust was the fact that, especially recently, there's been a mechanism by which mentees can choose or suggest mentors. And so having some agency over who you get partnered with really has accelerated the building of that trust. At least that came through in the study. So what did people gain? Well, all sorts of things. But most clearly, and apologies if this is looking really small on your screen like it is on mine, people found that they got new skills, the things you'd expect in terms of moving towards an exhibition or a major new project. But mostly the consistent thing was They got access to skills and knowledge. They had somebody they didn't feel embarrassed, to bring up the question or email a question when something came up about how do you do this? When you were confronted with this, what did you do? Just having someone whose door was open to those quick kind of queries. And then just once again, that confidence question, having someone who says, you are valid, you are doing good work, keep going. In this day and age, having that kind of affirmation, as we know, is just incredibly valuable. So what consistently emerged for both the early and mid-career mentees was the importance of the mentorship in boosting their confidence. It provided a license to either take themselves seriously as professional artists or creatives, especially for earlier career mentees, or to explore new skills or professional areas, and that was especially the case for mid-career mentees. With creative practice being subject to constant subjective judgment, unclear and precarious employment, underfunding, underemployment, and often unclear or inaccessible gatekeepers, the confidence imparted by someone you respect giving over some time to support you and encourage you to take your practice to the next step can't be overstated. Arguably, beyond all else, this personal boost was recognised as the key takeaway by mentees and was one of the reasons why the experience was genuinely seen as so pivotal with long-term positive impacts. The overwhelming majority of mentees found the experience valuable, with over 77% finding it invaluable. We did have options on there for not valuable at all, but you'll not really see them being ticked. There might be a few people who are sort of not too early to say is one of the options here, but to some degree, both mentors and mentees spoke very positively of the experience. Similarly, in terms of being rewarding, extremely rewarding. So Emma's spoken about the need for stretch peers, and I think that's a really good way to look at this. People who are supportive, but just push you to go that little bit further, to make that phone call maybe that you don't want to make, to go into the new space that you might be seen as a little bit too intimidating. And I think one of the other things we need to think about too is that universities are graduating a lot more people. We can jump on the internet and be selling directly straight away. But the reality is it does take longer to get established these days as a creative professional making an income from practice than it used to. The absence of government funding to have concentrated periods of time to just give yourself a big boost to your career at the start is probably part of that story. The way in which the internet's widened up avenues to sell is another. And just the fact that so many people are living in the gig economy, bringing together multiple jobs to support their practice is probably another. But it's for all these reasons that sense of a license to take yourself seriously as an artist, as a creative practitioner, is all the more important today. So moving ahead, one of the beautiful findings, one of the stories I think we'll see shortly, is that even when the formal end of the relationship or the mentorship came, most of these relationships to some extent have stayed on. That might only be in the form of once every 2 years you ask somebody to be a referee on a grant application, or you've got an exhibition opening and you ask them would they open it. These kind of things. Some people are still very much in contact. Some people are still collaborating together in exhibition spaces and other kinds of practices. But it is actually quite strongly marked how these are generally a lifelong kind of engagement, that this sets off a relationship that can be plugged back into across a lifetime and across a career. I'll just end on the point. One of the questions that Guildhouse wanted us to look into was the importance of would this encourage people to mentor other people? And I love the fact that a category had to be invented on our sheet, already doing it. The fact that mentorships were seen as so valuable mutually is one of the other key findings that emerged from this, that mentors are getting as much out of it as mentees. So given I'm getting the hurry on, I'll just stop here to accept the final point is we take for granted in many ways mentorships and mentoring, and I think it's important that we don't. This would be my key take home from this. We need scaffolded programs, we need funded programs to support these kind of initiatives moving forward. In businesses like my own at university, we can implement these within the structures of our employment contracts, but in the creative industries and for independent artists, it's much more difficult. And I think certainly the findings here reinforce the importance of having these kind of paid and scaffolded programs. So I'll just leave it there. Apologies, Emma.
Thank you so much, Susan. And there is no need for an apology at all. I hate rushing you, and I don't think anyone else would want me to. They're probably saying, "What are you talking about, Emma?" Let her keep going. Because we have some wonderful guest artists with us tonight, Lauren Simeone and Simone Tippett, I just would like to introduce them very briefly, and then we'll kick off just with a couple of questions so that they can give us their reflections on their time working together. Lauren is a contemporary jeweller, a creator of sculptures, wearable sculptures, a collaborator and an instigator. Her work is a homage to the sense of a wearable passport to a whimsical other reality, finding the beautiful and seductive in what is otherwise thought of as mundane. And Simone is a master printmaker, a curator, an organiser, and much beloved member of the South Australian arts community. And she's passionate about everything and anything printmaking and has a long-standing love of watery surfaces and the colour blue. So I'm going to just kick off a brief conversation with Lauren and Simone. Now, your mentorship together was in 2016. So that's some time ago now, in this strange old time where time doesn't mean anything in the same way that it used to. I'd wonder if we could start, Lauren, with you to sort of maybe just give us an insight into what the catalyst was for you seeking a mentorship with Simone.
Okay, so firstly, thanks for having me, and I am so grateful for my mentorship because it's led on to a really important artistic relationship and friendship with Simone, so that wouldn't have happened without Guildhouse's support, so I'm very grateful. So I was just thinking of ways about exhibiting contemporary jewellery in a different way. I make quite big work, and I see jewellery as sculpture, wearable sculpture, and I also like it exhibited on the wall. So I was thinking about different ways of exhibiting it, not just on the white wall. I am also a drawer, and I studied printmaking, but I didn't do screen printing when I was at uni. And I love the way my work makes shadows, and I wanted something immediate so I could sort of have a correlation between it being on the body and being on the wall. So you almost leave a print from when you take it off the wall and put it on the body. So, and also my work is often garlands or wreaths or leis. So it's about sort of giving and sharing and that sort of process. So, I'm a big drawer. So screen printing just seemed like the right option. And I'd mucked around in my studio quite a bit, but I just knew that I needed instruction. And the Guildhouse mentorship was the logical, richest way that I could gain exactly what I wanted without doing a full-on course. Because I know that when I get working, I'm quite intuitive and I end up breaking all the rules and just want to go for it. So Simone was I did a bit of research. She was the one. And so, she taught me formally and then we just went for it. And it was very much site-specific way of working. So I had prints on the wall. So it was also specifically geared up to an exhibition that I had in Shanghai called Layover. And I wanted, quite often the work isn't always exhibited on the body. I wanted to make wearable jewellery that also correlated with the works. And I wanted screen printing to be a part of that vehicle for wearing it, I suppose. So when you take off the work, you've got a shadow effectively on the other side. So, yeah, I just like mixing it up. I'm not very good at just doing one thing specifically.
Oh, we're so glad that you don't. Simone, were you familiar with Lauren's practice prior to the mentorship? Had you worked together formally before?
No.
I don't think we had. We knew of each other. We've got lots of friends in common, but we got to become really good friends through this process. I was very familiar with your work because I think there was a Guildhouse thing at the art gallery, and I got given a little bit of jewellery that Lauren had made.
50th.
And it was fantastic. because we all got hay fever and I got a bit of wattle. And so everybody would they'd come up and go, oh, that's an amazing bit of jewelry. And then they go, oh, my God, no, I get hay fever. So that was a really lovely way to get to know you.
It was artificial.
It was artificial. It was plastic jewelry. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And yes, sorry, what was the question?
Oh, you've answered it. I'm curious to find out how things have, what you've done together post that formal period of the mentorship. Because obviously, Lauren's outlined, there was obviously some specific goals, which sounds like I remember seeing the project as it came to life and as you went to Shanghai and you presented that incredible body of work. But what's happened since?
Well, during it, there was sort of like gift with purchase projects. So we had a show at the Wheat Sheaf Hotel called Glitterati, and I suppose it was a way of making we had an opportunity, so we took it, and we just, as we were making my work, Simone kept feeding me information of different screen printing techniques and different artists and different ways of working quite immediately, and I wanted to do it all, but not necessarily for my show. So we took other opportunities of making it together.
Yeah.
We're both late night owls and we like a giggle. So that was kind of good.
And Lauren introduced me to the joys of glitter, which was something that I hadn't actually experienced before. And so I feel that I actually learned probably more from you than you learned from me. Yeah.
You'll have to rewrite the paper now.
Yeah. Sorry for that, Susan. It was fantastic. Like it was incredibly nourishing for me to become part of Lauren's world. And I thought that you were very, very thoughtful, the way that you were careful around boundaries, because I'm not very good with boundaries. So Lauren had kind of picked that and worked in such a way that that the project went ahead, and it went ahead in a way that was very streamlined and comfortable for both of us, whilst challenging both of us in terms of art practice. But it never strayed into the areas of being uncomfortable personally. And I, we're both mature humans and mature artists, but and I think that that was just.
We're also incredibly busy.
You're
so
also
we don't have
busy.
a lot of
there's that.
Studio time, unfortunately, is always the lesser, and it's very precious. So we had to
make the most
it work.
Of it. So we'd have dip and chips and wine and music and screen printing, and at the same time we'd be coming up with a project, and at the same time we became friends.
Yeah,
and I might say it's a friendship. Colleagues. It's peers. Can we use that word? Yeah. But also it's something that's actually I personally have found incredibly I've been very grateful through during the whole COVID thing, which nobody's mentioned yet, because Lauren has checked in on me the whole way through, and occasionally I've checked in on you. We've looked after each other's dogs over the last year. So we've actually it's a friendship that is creatively nourishing, but it's also a whole lot of other stuff.
But there's also been other amazing opportunities. Like I was a part of a fancy
print run
that went to San Francisco, and
which was exactly 4 years ago, because it was when Trump got elected.
Well, we haven't raised the election.
So I've just lined Lauren up to
the end of the event.
So Lauren's about to accept being in it again. She just doesn't know yet.
Right.
Also, the techniques that I've learned through the mentorship, I feel very confident to pick up a screen and play much more than I would have otherwise.
So that was one of the things that was really interesting, was that Lauren is very playful. You'd never know that from the way she's given her presentation, but your ability to take a process, run with it, break the rules, but be respectful of it is kind of amazing. Mm-hmm. And for me, as someone who teaches, that is so invigorating and inspiring.
Yeah.
So
my pleasure.
That is beautiful. And thank you so much for giving us a little insight and introduction, because what I'd like to do now is introduce the Lord Mayor Sandy Verschoor, who will actually conduct a bit more of a Q&A with yourselves and Susan to sort of reflect on some aspects of the research that have been discussed, but also put it in the context of, I guess, the ambitions for a place like Adelaide in South Australia, and what kind of cultural enterprise, what kind of cultural ecology do we want to have and nourish and foster. So to introduce the Lord Mayor, she probably doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. Sandy Verschoor, our Lord Mayor of City of Adelaide, is a first-generation Australian of Dutch, French, Portuguese and Ceylonese descent. Her parents gave her a deep-rooted understanding of business, an adventurous spirit, commercial acumen and a love of the arts. Sandy has a long history of working to advance the arts in South Australia, and she has an ambitious agenda for Adelaide. I'd like to hand over to the Lord Mayor now to make a couple of comments from her perspective, but also then to facilitate a Q&A. Now, there may also be the opportunity to answer a couple of questions or ask a couple of questions from the audience if we have time. So if you have a burning question you would like to ask, please do make a note of that in the chat function and we'll see what we can do. Okay, over to you, Lord Mayor.
So just acknowledging that we're on Kaurna country and paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge their connection to this precious land. Those of you, and I can see there's a few of you there that know me, probably get sick of me sort of coming out every now and then talking about a city of makers, but it really does underpin a lot of what we're trying to achieve in the City of Adelaide. We were able to put an outcome being dynamic city culture as one of the foundation pillars of our strategic plan, and I've worked really hard with the team, and I can see Anne and Sarah there, really talking about how we would go about that. And there's been so much work that's already been done, but we're just going through a revision of the cultural strategy, and that's just enabling us to refocus on 4 primary areas, one of those being artists and artisans, one of them being arts festivals, one of them being public art, and of course UNESCO City of Music. And if we can actually look at the city through those 4 lenses and achieve everything that we've got in that plan, it will be sensational. In terms of mentoring, look, there was some great stuff. I discovered reverse mentoring a while ago. It is actually amazing. That's when I find someone who is seeing things through younger eyes than mine, who is grown up in a digital world that I didn't. So, and actually being able to see how they are viewing things, and that has been incredible. And I also note, Susan, really talking about what the mentees were getting out of it in terms of achievement and self-worth and greater confidence. And I think for all artists, self-worth and confidence sort of underpins everything in terms of the work that artists are doing and giving themselves permission to do. We also did the Business of Being Creative, which is a program that we've been running, and we did some of that with you this time at Guildhouse. And that's really about building business and promotional skills, and also creating those networks and being supported through mentoring, which I think is really important. So I guess what I'll do is I'll go to a few questions. To Lauren and Simone, I was really curious as to how you started your relationship, whether you set out what it is, what you're hoping to achieve as mentor and mentoree, or whether it was a very sort of fluid progression.
I think we had a series of meetings.
Yeah.
You're very good at documenting and dot pointing, and then we distilled it right down. And yeah, I think I knew what I wanted the outcomes to be, but creatively, of course, when you go on a journey, they're not going to turn out exactly, they're going to go down different paths because you've learnt different skills. But we definitely had structure. And the year that I did it with Guildhouse, I don't know if it's the same, but it was very formal. Like we had to report in quarters, which wasn't hard to do. But so we definitely knew our goals, but we did continue on after.
Yes.
And Susan, in the report, not in the report so much as your research, does it sort of talk or indicate if there's a right way or a wrong way to mentor or be mentored?
It's a good question. Because there's so little research that's being done, I can't actually say that the research has any clear ideas on that. I think the main thing that will be consistent, and this isn't just creative mentorships, this is all mentorships, is just having some clarity around goals from the beginning and what is possible. And just the mentee and the mentor having some scope and space to say, how much time can you give? What can I reasonably expect from you? How do you want me to communicate? How often? And these are my aims for the project. And how do you feel about those? So just having those kind of conversations up front rather than finding out 2 weeks in that having a phone call every second day isn't exactly what one person's expectation was. Those kind of clarity around expectations. And of course they change once you're into it. But if you're starting off on a respectful basis of communication and what works for you, this works for me, it gives you a solid basis upon which to keep evolving as it seems fit and in a way that doesn't upset either party.
Yeah. So Simone, from your experience, what makes a good mentee?
Well, Loz was perfect. She had a really clear idea of how she wanted to operate, and I also know you had a clear idea of what you wanted to do. The reason I put the emphasis on that first one is that not everyone has a clear idea of what they want to do. Part of the idea of a mentorship is you might be trying to work that out, but Lauren had really clear ideas of how you wanted to function in terms of boundaries. And so in the pitch that Lauren made for the mentorship, she had outlined very clearly how many sessions, how long they'd go for, how often they would be. And she'd also run it past me to make sure it was something that worked for me. So because we're both really busy. And that was with hindsight, having read Susan's paper at lunchtime today, and with what you were talking about, the what people expect and where things do or don't meet what people expect, that was kind of brilliant, the fact you did that.
You gave me lots of homework.
I did give her lots of homework, and she was really nice about that. So she was polite most of the time. Also, we had so much fun.
Yeah, I think
so much fun.
That's absolute core to it, isn't it?
You can be really serious about your work, and you can be really serious about what your intentions are, but you can also not take yourself too seriously. And because of that, it was really fun. It was really easy because I was always looking forward to seeing Lauren. I still do.
And Simone also invited me to other classes she was running. So she was incredibly generous. She'd say, I'm doing a lithography class on plastic. It's not quite what you're doing, but if you come along, you'll learn about this technique, which will make you think about X, Y, Z. So I did get more than my money's worth, I reckon.
And so did I.
A clarity, but also and a generosity.
So you were really good at going, no, I know. No, just no. No, I don't want to do lithography on plastic. Like, I'd really rather do screen printing, which is what so you were quite clear about that as well. So I think really it was about really good communication.
Yeah.
And Susan, mentorships clearly play a role in terms of that very broad spectrum of education and training. So do you think your research is pointing to sort of a gap in the education offering, or do you think there'll always be a need for mentoring as something that sits alongside an education offering?
I definitely think the latter, that this is something that needs to sit outside of that or in dialogue with it. My previous research found that while people did get exposed to business skills, for example, at university, they were more interested in the creative practice. It was only when 2 years later you needed to figure out how to set up payment at a market that you really looked online and went to Google that kind of information that really sunk in. So the fact that so many of the participants in these programs are at all stages of career, including often later career, I think indicates that this is something that you need on top of and beyond formal or university education. Absolutely. It's an essential way in which people can pivot and change and learn new skills or apply.
Emma, I am going to hand back to you because I'm sure that there's lots of questions from your audience here tonight. I've been absolutely pleased to be part of this, and that's my alarm going, to be part of this. And it's great to see you again, Simone. I'll come and do some more playing with you soon. But and thank you for everybody. And Susan, it was a great report. I'd love to see some more research around the mentoring to sort of back up, the outcomes that actually we are all looking for, and that is that, with that evidence base that we can actually sort of prove that this is part of what's needed, and particularly it could be funded appropriately.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Sandy. It was a pleasure to see you, and I know you've got to get off somewhere very quickly to the Her Majesty's Theatre, I understand, so we won't hold you up.
Right.
I will say goodbye to the Lord Mayor, and I'll just maybe finish with one last question, and I'll then wrap up for the evening. We have a question here from Henry Wolf for you, Susan, actually. You spoke a lot about the significance of mentorship towards confidence building and validation for practitioners. Does the study identify why this has appeared as such a need within the South Australian arts ecology?
It's an interesting question, Henry. Because I haven't done exactly parallel research in other states or locations around the globe, I don't have a comparison point. But my gut feeling is this isn't unique. I think these particular set of circumstances are ones that are facing creatives around the globe, or at least those operating in similar kinds of contexts to us here in South Australia. And I think certainly perhaps for other people across Australia, while some state and territory governments might have different kinds of support environments, on the whole, the messaging we're getting from at least our national government isn't pro-arts, isn't pro the creative sector in any meaningful way. So we're all feeling a bit under the pump and undervalued, at least in that kind of space. And I say that as somebody working in the university sector who shares that kind of rhetoric. So I don't necessarily think this is unique to South Australia, would be my punt if I had to go out on a limb and say it. I think this is something that's across the sector, at least much of Australia.
Mm.
I don't know if other people have any thoughts on that, on Lauren and Simone, your insiders on this.
I think they're essential given the state of art schools at the moment. I'm sorry, but yeah, I think they're essential. And, you know, you need to keep checking in and keep learning all the time. And there's so many skills that I'm scared that are just going to slide away. So we've got to do them, you know, and if we want to have, you know, generations of quality artists, we have to do it.
And thoughtful people who are being thoughtful and questioning and trying to find new ways ahead. That's really important as well.
I
Goes
also
hand in hand.
reflect on the corporate sector, where it is an expected norm that mentoring goes on throughout your professional life, and that it's very much endorsed and supported by the organisations that employ you. That's actually a structured and, as Susan said, a scaffolded process. But within the creative sector, where people are self-employed largely or working in hybrid portfolio careers, where is the time and the space for that if it isn't through programs such as this? You know, that is the actual, the reality is that without the sanction of a program and funding that supports the time of the mentor and the mentee to step away from other paid work or that precious studio time to your own practice, it simply wouldn't happen. And that's what I think the research really indicates, even at a very early level. But that seems, without wanting to end on my note, I do feel like we did say that we would be finished and wrapped up by 7, and I just would like to close by thanking you all for joining us. I know it's a very strange thing for us to be meeting remotely and digitally. We would so love to be in a big room all together sharing a nice drink and some cheese, but it's all a little bit complicated at the moment. So we do appreciate everyone sort of finding the time and gathering in this strange online environment. And I would like to echo Susan's thank yous to the artists who gave their time to the research, because they were in-depth conversations and they were taking people back in some instances back to 15 years ago and reflecting on those experiences. So I really do want to acknowledge, because that time is precious. And of course, thank you to the University of South Australia for their partnership in this research study and their commitment to excellence in developing new bodies of research around issues like this. Of course, the Ian Potter Foundation for their support of the Catapult program and so many important arts initiatives around the country. You know, the City of Adelaide and other partners to the Catapult program, including very many generous individual donors. I won't say any more. I could bang on, but thank you so much for your time and contribution. And please go to our website, open up the EDM tomorrow and have a read of the report. I think you'll find it really illuminating. And we certainly look forward to sharing the final version of the report in 18 months' time, as Susan said. Thanks, everyone. Have a really beautiful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Emma. Bye-bye, everyone.
See you.
Bye.